Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode of The Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions and the people behind them. My name is Nicholas Zard, and I am your host on this podcast. In fact, I've been your host for 2 years now. Believe it or not, this is our second year, and we're very excited. Now, we strive to give you one great interview a week from all of these people who work in these innovative mobility solutions. And once in a while, I need to have a little bit of a break. So today I want to do something a little bit different. Now, we still have, by the way, plenty of people to go until the end of the year. That's not the problem. But I wanted to talk about something that I see happening very often. And I not only see it in the new startups that are out there to create these innovative mobility solutions, but I also see them doing the same thing that a lot of companies, the same mistakes that a lot of bigger companies are making. And I'm talking about traditional OEM companies. So today I want to talk about communications. How interesting, because it is very important when you are in a startup mode. It is very important when you are part of these innovative mobility solutions. It is extremely important because I see the same mistake being repeated in advanced air mobility, AAM companies pretty much all of the time. And I'm willing to bet you that 90 to 95% of the people who make that mistake probably kind of understand the general idea of communications, but they still resort right back to making that mistake. That mistake is very simple. There used to be an order to communications, especially within a company. And the order was simple. Well, communications first, which then handed it out to marketing, which polished it for the public. And then public relations, PR, basically, went out there and made sure that the right channels were used to display the message or to ventilate the message, as we call it internally. So I'm so passionate about that I actually had to take notes. So imagine you're a founder building the next big thing, and it could be, electric vehicle, it could be an electric aircraft, it could be a locomotive, it could be an electric boat, it can be anything, a spaceship, it doesn't really matter. And then somehow you get your seed funding, right? Now you're ready to get into the series A's, B's, et cetera, so on and so forth. And you've hired all the right engineers. You've got most of your key positions, your C-level positions filled out. Now you're asking for, a good pitch deck so that you can go into your series A, B, C's, and et cetera, so on and so forth. But 6 months later, you're realizing that something isn't working out, right? Now, of course, we've gone through a winter series of investors, or a winter period of investments. Now it's coming back. So it's the right time to actually really work on that communication strategy. But you notice it that your marketing strategy isn't making a dent. And now there are investors coming back into these innovative mobility solutions, specifically, by the way, in AAM, or advanced air mobility. And you're wondering what's going on. Why is the message not reaching the people who are supposed to be to hear all of this, right? And so I'm here to tell you that I not only have 20 years of experience in innovative mobility solutions, but I have another 20 years before that. Yeah, I'm that old. I'm Generation X. But I also have 20 years of experience outside of mobility industry, of the mobility. I have also 20 years of um, innovative, disruptive technology industries before mobility, mostly in the IT computer world or the early internet world. And we're going to get to that very soon. So the gist of really what's happening is most professionals, and this is something I've seen over and over and over again, most professionals confuse communication and marketing, and they're not the same thing at all. In fact, these days, for some very strange reason, most companies, and of course startups that look at what most companies do, jump directly into marketing, hoping that it will be able to do the job that communication does. But they still use PR. Well, there used to be an order to all of this. Communication, most companies had a communications department. And believe it or not, these guys were not marketing because they had a marketing department that they worked with, and they had PR, sometimes internal, sometimes external, that would vent out the information out there. When it comes to innovative mobility solutions, it's especially difficult because, well, at least on the AAM side of things, it hasn't happened yet, right? On the EV side of things, it has happened yet, but you still have to follow the same obstacles that AAM follows, same obstacles that all other innovative mobility solution industries have to follow, is that the regulatory landscape changes. We don't even know what it is exactly yet. We're working on it on AAM, on EVs. Well, there used to be one. Now there's another. And of course, you want to persuade investors to fund you for 5, 10 years, at least a decade when it comes to invest in advanced air mobility. And you're also asking people to adopt a different type of infrastructure. You're asking people to basically see themselves flying in an unproven electric aircraft, for the most part, people haven't heard of. And the worst part about it is they keep on hearing things like flying cars and air taxis, which that sounds great, but that's nowhere near what they are. So you see, again, marketing gave that idea of the concept of what you're doing, but not the reality of what you're doing. And the reality of what you're doing is you're making mobility more efficient. You're helping people save time. Now, I know a lot of companies have jumped into that bandwagon, and that's been, well, very disruptive in the industry. So, building trust in industries that don't exist is difficult. And the best way to do it is you really need a good communication team that will talk to the founder, talk to the original people who started the companies. Why did you start it? What was the motivation? What are you solving out there? And most of the time, by the way, it's not technical at all. You know, bottom line, first principles thinking in everything that we do in innovative mobility solutions is, well, we're working on the human being. We're working on humans being able to go from one place to another in a seamless way as possible, that is enjoyable, efficient, makes sense, that is profitable for everyone. So already this is a little bit of a spin and should get you to think a little bit more about this. You cannot market your way into trust. That's just that simple. People call baloney a long time before it happens. I'll give you an example. I get plenty of people asking me to talk to them to see if their services fit my needs on LinkedIn. And they go, they tell you to go to this website. And what do I find? The same template over and over again, the buildup of enthusiasm, the young faces that smile and tell you that they're making, 10, well, I mean, 100, 200, $300,000 a year. And all the way, all the way, all the way at the bottom, you have to put your name, sign up with everything. And then eventually, after 3, 4, maybe even 5 clicks, you kind of get a vague idea of what they're trying to do, but nowhere in there it tells you how much it costs. So you wasted my time, you've wasted a lot of people's time, and that just really is annoying. And this is what we see over and over and over again. And there's a little bit of a burnout out there right now because all the press releases are all about, hey, we're going to be flying very soon. Hey, we have a $1,000 affordable EV coming out there. And all of these, most people are tired. And this is what I'm getting from the industry out there. When I go and ask people about, have you heard of flying cars and air taxis? They kind of say, yeah, but, don't think it's happening. It's hype. Yeah, it's really exciting. This company is going to be certified this year. And I'm thinking, well, do you actually understand what certification is? Because that's prototype certification. That's very different, right? So there's a lot of misconceptions because the press releases are being sent out there are very enthusiastic. They're very marketing driven and they follow the same template, the one that after a while, if you really do understand it well, you find out that Well, you and I are going to be flying in these aircraft in about 4 years. And most likely that's going to be first VVIP and then VIP, then business, so on and so forth. So, understanding the critical distinction between communications and marketing is marketing communications, they drive specific campaigns and sales. That's what they do. They're public facing. That's what they're out there to do. They're transactional. They focus on channels, conversations, optimization. They ask, how do we reach customers? What channels work? What's our conversation rate? But have you noticed that they don't actually ask you, why are you doing this? And this is the difference, by the way, between being just another company out there that makes a lot of noise and a company that people can go, wow, this is really amazing what they're doing because they can see how it relates to them. That's communication work there for you. Strategic communication, it manages reputations, it manages values, purpose, relationships. It's foundational and existential. It focuses on identity. It determines the culture and the trust with the stakeholders because it knows what the foundation is. It knows what the founders want to do. I mean, it even understands the price of the bolt that they're using and how it was outsourced and everything. It's involved in almost everything that the company does in all the talks and all the strategic thinking because the more your communications people know and understand, the better they can write the story and then the better they can hand it off to that fantastic marketing team of yours that will shine it and put it out there. There's one allegory that we use a lot in communications is that, the communications people are the shoemaker, right? And the shoemaker, well, they can make really nice shoes, but that's about it. They don't usually sell them, they don't display them. The shoe shine, that's the marketing company. That's the company that has a window. That's the company that shines the shoes. That's the company that presents the shoes. These guys they're important, they're yin to our yang. And then, of course, you have the PR, and that's the signs on the window or the marketing campaigns or the email campaigns or the big neon signs out there. That's the marketing. And when you follow that order, when communication has done all the right things, has talked to you, understands where you're coming from, what you're trying to do, then it knows how to write the story. It actually knows how to define the culture. It knows how to do all of this. And then it can hand it off to marketing, and marketing polishes it out there and does a really great job using, of course, PR. The critical difference is marketing amplifies a message. It doesn't come up with a message. And when they do, again, it's a forward facing thing. It's outside facing. It's not inside facing usually. Now there are great marketers who can do that, don't get me wrong, but 90% of the time I'm finding that that's not the case. Strategic communication digs into the who's and what's before it creates the message. So this is more aligned with who you are, not aligned with the targets or the kind of money you want to make. That comes after. You have to do the foundational work first. I wrote about this extensively on our sister website, ElectricAirMobility.news, and I called it Communications First, Advanced Air Mobility. And the core argument, especially in AAM, now that funding is finally coming back again, the first wave of fundings are gone. Now you have more aerospace savvy people who understand that it takes a decade. You need to have at least 1,000 engineers, and you need at least $1 billion before you have something that's certified out there and can be produced. Not to confuse communications with marketing, and how to avoid the heavy marketing hand that is a bit of a sales pitch and really turns off people in the end, and how to use public relations PR to not confuse your public anymore, but to create credibility and stop wasting your time, basically, and wasting money. This obviously applies well beyond AAM. And, any innovation-driven startup creating new markets or technology needs strategic communication before marketing. So I'm going to back it up with some research there, and you can go and read the article. It's got plenty of research. Forbes found out that they actually did a lot of research on founder communications, and it shows that clear, consistent, strategic voice is a catalyst for growth. Obviously, nobody wants to hear you say, well, we said that yesterday, but now we're saying this, right? So clear, concise, consistent. And by the way, be careful because not saying enough is equally as bad. Saying too much, not enough, equally as bad. And communication helps you find that right middle that reflects who you are, not what marketing wants you to be. When you finally have that, well, you, by the way, you start to attract the right talent. Now, people really get that. They want to work with you. I don't know if you've ever seen, and I unfortunately cannot name the names of. There are some very well-known companies out there, very well-known startups out there, where people are miserable working there because it's more of a slavish kind of industry. And if you ever go out there, just look around. Who smiles? Who's really truly happy? Usually only the ones who make a lot of money up there, but not the ones doing what they love doing, which is really sad. Babson College also shows that high performing startup treat culture as a strategy. Now, can't say enough about that. Culture, defining the right culture through the use of correct communications is a strategy, and it's a strategy you need to invest before you get yourself a marketing team or outsource your marketing to a company. It's not something you do separate, it's something you do together. And plenty of case studies on internal communication show that culture change only works when communications is involved from the start, not bolted on afterwards. So a lot of startups, unfortunately, that I've seen make the same mistake. A lot of companies compartmentalize their structure. And that is probably one of the biggest mistakes you can do. That's so last century. That's so 1980s. That's so you don't do that. Take NVIDIA, for instance. That's a thriving company. And if you ever want a stock that keeps on going up, by the way, no forward facing comments here or allusions here, but look at NVIDIA's stock. It always goes up. It does very well. And you know why? They have a darn good communication strategy. Even the CEO keeps an open door policy. This is well known. It's part of their culture. Open door policy, meaning anyone can sit at any decision making sessions. Obviously, in real life, I don't know exactly how that works, but that's the driving motivation. And that's why NVIDIA has such a great reputation. So I'm going to give you now some examples of what I went through. I worked with an eVTOL company that was positioning itself as, revolutionizing urban mobility. That was all fine and everything, but that was very much a marketing language. In fact, when I joined as the communications person, reporting directly to the CEO, I was working with the marketing person who thought they were hiring me. And I was just like, wait, this is going to be tough. So we dug into the original motivation, discovered that the real driver was not revolutionizing urban air mobility, but it was to be present in every aspect of the industry. And I'm talking about building, operating, maintaining, everything, strategy, UTM, you name it. It just wanted to have a part in that. So you see, very different from just revolutionizing urban air mobility, which that's a great buzzword, means absolutely nothing to people. But that was the marketing take on it. Once they finally stopped that, and I made them aware of how unique that was because nobody else did that, then they stopped a little bit and they noticed that they were no longer fighting against a crowded house that wanted to do the same thing, revolutionize urban air mobility. In fact, revolutionize urban mobility, not even air mobility, right? This is what everybody was going after at the time. And so we started focusing more on becoming the leader in the industry in terms of like understanding everything, knowing everything, which by the way also opens up education training along the way and a lot of other routes that I told them that they could do at some point. Marketing could not create that transition and that transformation. I mean, it understood it, but it didn't know how to go about it because again, marketing is, well, it faces forward. It takes the object already made and makes it even more desirable to the public. So once we had that strategic communication clarity, the culture started to change a little bit. And we then were able to start devising of a better communication strategy. And then I would hand it off to the marketing person. And well, today is a different story because something else also happened, which unfortunately I'm not at liberty to tell, but I can kind of explain it without, breaking any NDAs. Is something bad happened inside the company and happens in a lot of these companies. It wasn't anything that was, a deal breaker for the company, but instead of being very upfront and honest about it, they let the rumors go out there. They let journalists talk about the problem and they never acknowledged it or denied it, which was even worse because as an ex-journalist, I can tell you if you don't deny it or acknowledge it, then there's definitely fire under that smoke. If you just deny it, there's smoke. We know it. And if you acknowledge it, we know it's smoke, and then we're gonna ask you more questions, right? But they didn't do it. So after that, all kinds of things happened. Unfortunately, the company was brought back into the fold of its original mother company. And well, my understanding of advanced air mobility, my understanding of communications did not fit with the old guard of the other more traditional, very conservative aviation company that took over, and I was let out. But just to tell you what happened later is 5 years later, they're finally coming back into the limelight. And well, they have a great product. I still love them. I think they're fantastic. And a lot of people have moved away from the company, not moved away by themselves, but just now have different positions in other companies. And I'll let you try to figure out why all of that could have been changed if we had had the right communication strategy from the get go, as I was asking them to do. By the way, I'm not complaining about having worked for these companies. I've learned so much that I love it. I love where I am today. And there's definitely a lot of lessons to be learned for everyone. So giving marketing a coherent story that goes and very strong boundaries, by the way, is once you have that strategy, communication, strategic clarity, and cultural alignment, that's the next thing that we really work on. Then we can hand it off to marketing, right? And we work closely with marketing because look, yeah, this is what they're saying. All right, so why don't we do it this way? Well, hang on, does that fit with that? And we help marketing understand all of it. So the more information, again, marketing has, because, hey, we've been involved in all the decision-making process up until now, means marketing has a full product to go out there, and now we'll be able to really target it efficiently. But if you go directly to marketing, it will not know how to target it efficiently because it doesn't really know where you're coming from. On top of what I've just said before, a lot of companies compartmentalize their decision making, don't have that open door policy, make decisions, and then all of a sudden they're going in such a weird direction. You're left going, how can I even help this strange pasta mess that they've created here? So at that point, marketing has a clear value proposition, like I said, and it is grounded in an authentic purpose and motivation. Now we have defined targets, by the way, for stakeholders and a consistent brand voice reflecting the company's cultures and the boundaries around on brand messages. And we go way further than that. We do critical analysis of what will happen when there is a problem, right? Muscle memory. We train these people to say the right thing at the right time. We give them B rolls that they can use when there will be an accident, because statistically there will be an accident. And we tell them how to do this crisis management system in a way that just rolls off their tongues and everything. But if you use marketing to do that, you're going to have a lot of problems because it's going to sound like you're just talking about yourself and you just want to sell more things. That's not the way to do it. Trust me, been there, done that. By the way, I also wrote a lot of press releases for another AAM company that had hired me to be the communications person. Again, also directly working with the CEO, and I ended up doing press releases after press releases. I had zero input, and after 3 months, I said, "No, thanks. This is not for me," and that was it. Again, because press releases were all about, "Look at what we did. Look at what we did. Look at what we did," but it didn't really reflect what the company was all about. At least the things that I had heard, that I'd spoken to with not only the founders, but the deep down engineers who were working on some brilliant ideas that needed to be talked about. Very sad. So without this foundation, marketing is sort of randomly hitting it out there and everything. I mean, it has a lot of experience with a lot of other things, but if it doesn't know where you're coming from, which is what communication does, it's going to have a hard time. I also worked with another company, and this one was a very interesting experience because I was brought on to be the business director at one point and making sure they understood I was a communications person, I was a strategy communications person, and again, all of this is communication strategy, right? And eventually, I went further up, and I try to bring in the right people to do the right thing. But the very first thing is I went out there and I really listened to the founder. I really listened to what they were doing. I listened to what did they see out there that they all of a sudden wanted to do something about it. What was that original spark? Again, this is the strategy communications part of me. I know how to do this. I know through my coaching experience, I know how to ask you, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What is that one thing that made you want to do this? Aha, now I have it. And I see your engagement and I see your excitement. Then after that, we can work together on building that communication strategy. So they were positioning themselves as a agnostic player in the industry, in the technology industry. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but when you tell people out there that you're an agnostic technology company, it means two things. For most of the people, it means absolutely nothing because by default, everything should be agnostic, even though, well, we know it's not, right? And those are just technical jargon terms. They don't really tell you anything about it. They were competing on specs and speed and output and redundant designs and things like that. Well, that meant nothing because there was another company that was already coming out with something and was starting to show it out there and it was being tested out there. And guess what's going to happen in the end? People will go to the first company that's out there, even if it's more expensive. Money, by the way, is not so much a problem in this case. Trust me, I've seen it, been there, done that. Although those were all great qualities that they had, they were technical qualities and it did not emulate well in their communication strategy, but because they had no communication strategy. So this left the startup with very little differentiation, despite the fact that they were very different. Their business model of install, own, operate your infrastructure was drawn out by the hype of others, and it was mimicking the same message, but in a way that just didn't really differentiate them in the end, which is crazy because they were highly differentiated. So I brought a few right operations focused people. That was the first thing I wanted to do. And then we started creating the strategic narrative. Marketing would amplify this later on. Unfortunately, again, it didn't happen. This was really frustrating. And it didn't happen because, well, it's the startup was being overtaken by a lot of compartmentalization. There was no sharing of what was happening. Decisions were being made without informing people. And as the communication person, if I don't know where you're going, I have no idea how to make that communication strategy fit with anything. And remember, you might have the best ideas, but if you don't share that with your team intelligently and tell them this is where we're coming from, this is why we're doing this, which, by the way, that's what communication strategy does. It helps you formulate all these things. Well, then you're not going to get much of anywhere. And the worst part about this particular case is that decision making was being made in a very closed loop of people who were not veteran experts. And I'm coming in with 20 years of experience in innovative mobility solutions. So I've seen a lot of things that work, a lot of things that don't work. I'll give you a few examples. Robert Bassi, I've been listening to him for 5 years about vertiport infrastructure. He's the one who wrote the EB 105. This is sort of the guideline that we have for vertiports infrastructure, what needs to happen, not. And I know it pretty darn well because I've read it over and over and over again. I also talked to Rex Alexander a lot, who knows a lot about heliports and a lot about vertiports. And he goes even further into details with that. And I talk with a lot of other people. So I have a very good understanding of what works, what doesn't work. And when I see a drawing, I start laughing most of the time. I'm like, that was not drawn by someone who knows anything about a heliport or downwash or anything whatsoever. And that was a shame because you wasted a lot of time and energy just going in a direction that wouldn't have happened if you just get your communication team on board from the beginning and then start really figuring out who the right veteran experts are. And this is something I see, by the way, over and over and over again. And by the way, when I mean veteran experts, I'm also talking about communications people, operators, energy people. I mean, in this industry, we need a lot of experts to come together before you have a coherent platform and, of course, a strategy. This is why, again, it's fun to be a communications person. You're in the middle of everything, but it's tiring. And it's not that you want to be in the middle of everything. It's just in order to do your job, you really need to know everything to do your job well because, well, you're helping that strategy of the company. And you're helping by building the communication strategy, which is what you stand for, which is what you are out there. It's a reflection of who you are. So, ever since the company has pivoted, now it's doing something similar, but it's actually doing a lot of great work. It's diversifying and everything. But sadly, I'm still seeing that, decision making is still done in very small little places that don't always take the feedback that they should do outside of that. And that's really disheartening. I'm going to tell you also about another company too, and this goes even before I was in Innovative Mobility Solutions. And this was a company that was one of the very early internet company. I'm talking about 1999, right before the dot-com burst. I was working with a super powerful up and coming internet company. They had a magnificent product. I'm not going to say who it is because it wouldn't be very fair. The people in it were fantastic. It was just wonderful. Oh, and I'll tell you one thing I didn't do is I didn't get stock options like they were offering me. I preferred hard cash at the time. And well, as we'll find out later, I was right to have done that. So I advised this company on communications and I helped them with their computer systems because that's what I did back then. And I found that everything was based on their marketing intentions. It was interesting. So they were very marketing and PR focused. And, it was good, but people didn't really fully understand the whole potential of what this company was doing. And the potential was that this was a volunteer based, this was a community action based system, a service provider that would bring your news directly to you, but according to who's out there in your neighborhood, your vicinity. It was unique, right? Nobody does that to this day. Now we have algorithms, and Lord knows, I'm sorry, Google, but you don't hit it very often for me. But this was basically people outside of your doors who knew what was going to happen, a sort of a calendar of things that was delivered to you directly. And as soon as they understood that, well, yeah, the company started looking really good. Unfortunately, the dot-com burst happened, and it happened in a horrible way. And this is a telltale sign about be very careful where you work, and especially when you are in these disruptive technology industries. I went to visit them one day, just normal, every week I went to visit them. And I saw people that were just downtrodden. And one person held a piece of paper and he said, "That's all I'm worth, a piece of paper." I said, "What do you mean?" "My house in the Hamptons, my Jaguars, my hundreds of thousands of dollars that I was going to get out of this, it's gone." And I remember thinking, what? So I said, "What about the communication strategy that we did? Didn't that happen? Didn't that do anything?" He said, "Yeah, but it's too late." And that stuck by me. It's too late. Gosh darn it. If only we would have done that straight from the beginning, right? Or if we would have done it a little bit quicker, faster, that company would still be around today, meaning you and I would have a really fantastic product that would be delivered in our inboxes every day or on our phones now about what is going on outside of here. And by the way, I'm still waiting for this to happen because I always hear of things that happen on Friday night and Saturday night on Monday. Not great. So yeah, I'm now going to talk about why are we in the mess that we are in today? Why is communication such an afterthought? And why do all of these companies and startups included, why are they going to marketing first, then PR, and then somewhere in the middle of it, they're like, whoops, let's add some communications to it? Well, in the 1970s, way back then, there was an order, and you really had a communication team that talked to the owners, talked to everyone, understood how the company worked in and out, and then would write down the strategy and then would hand it off to marketing, and they would have a little bit of back and forth. And that was a great order. Then PR was involved, and it was wonderful and it worked really well until something crazy happened in the 80s. Some call it a coke induced hallucination. Yes, I said that horrible word here. And, in the early 90s, it culminated to an absolute nonsense. I mean, we even had Welsh saying that companies have to fire the least 10% who are not performing really well. And that set such a trend in the industry. We were going through absolutely bizarre episodes of insanity where people were saying, "What's wrong with a little greed?" Dude, everything is wrong with greed, especially when it comes from the wrong motivation. And greed is one of the seven deadly sins, right? And not just ours here in the West, but all over the world. There's a reason why, for hundreds of thousands of years, let's just say thousands of years, greed was never seen as a good thing. It doesn't give you really good results in the end. So all of these things were shuffled around. No longer, the communication team just didn't seem all that appropriate anymore. They wanted marketing because they wanted to make money and they wanted more money. And now this is why when you see a press release, it sounds like a sales pitch. They want money. They're after your wallet. And guess what's happening now? Ad blockers on YouTube, ad blockers on Google. People are tired of it. It's too much. It's, a little cheesy of sorts, right? So my communications with a lot of people in this industry has been about, do you understand the right order? Yes or no? 50% of the time they do, 50% they don't. When they do, I ask them, so why are you using marketing? Well, it's the way we do it and everything. And so I asked them, I said, is it working out well? If they say yes, it's like, well, good luck. We'll talk later. And it doesn't. But when they're saying, no, not really, we're like, well, do you know why? And then finally we get that conversation going about what communication does, what it really does, and how it then gives it to marketing, so on and so forth. And they get it. And most of the time, 80 to 90% of the time, they continue again straight into this marketing strange pattern of marketing first, press releases, and then eventually a little bit of communications on this side. However, there are some really smart companies that do marketing well first. I don't know how they're set up inside, but I can think of a few companies. And by the way, when I mean a few companies, they really fit on one hand that really do a really, really, really great job. And their strategy is brilliant. The way they talk is brilliant. The way they present themselves is brilliant. Their marketing campaigns are absolutely well done. They're stately, they're subtle, they're not overly heavy-handed. They're perfect. And you know what? These companies, we all look up to them. We think, wow, these guys are the real players in the industry. These guys are not just throwing press releases after press releases after press releases. They do less, but they do it really well. And you can hear that and you can see that. So if I had to give some ideas on what you can do, even without a communications a person or a group of communications people, is first of all clarify your purpose and your ecosystem role, and make sure that it fits. Right. So if you have this revolutionary device out there, make sure that you understand why you're doing it. What was your motivation, and what do you want to do with it? Then stop. Think about that for a little while, right? And then start to see your image being built, your business image being built on that. Why does your company need to exist? This is one of the questions that I ask, and get really specific about what is your role in that company and the larger ecosystem. If tomorrow you disappear, what would be missing? That's also another good question I ask. In AAM, I ask, are you an OEM? Are you an operator? Are you infrastructure? Are you a technology suppliers? And in EV, is it fleet, consumer? What's your charging assumptions are you making out there? Those are the very fundamental first level kind of discussions that we have. But then we start to build a culture through that internal narrative that really fits you. That's the next step. So work on that if you can on your own. And if you can't, obviously, you know where to find me. You do know where to find me, right? Design a culture intentionally, not as a byproduct. And this is really important. People need to know that they belong to a culture that they can relate to and that they can be proud of. And I tell you one thing right now, not a lot of people are super proud of the companies they work in. They work because they need to make money. And that's just about the worst thing you can ever do. In AAM, you need to be disciplined in your innovation approach, bold enough to push boundaries, rigorous enough for regulators. Those are very important, but you need to communicate that in a way that is appealing, even by the way, to regulators and especially to investors. Align the founder's voice to strategy. Now, that's something that I see very often. Founders don't talk very often. And a lot of times when I hear founders talk, all I see is just very polished marketing glibs and not a lot of consistency. In fact, when I reach out to them to appear on my shows, I get a lot of, I don't even know what I get, but it just doesn't even answer the question. I know you don't have a lot of time, but hey, this is an opportunity to come out there and talk about why you're doing all of this. It's not important. I think it is. But then feed marketing the real story, not what you want, not your financial projections, not all of that absolutely makes no sense. You need to tell your marketing department, I am doing this because of that. I do this because of that. These are my foundations or our foundations, if you prefer. That's what we want. And let marketing figure out the rest, but have a back and forth that's very open and everything. Don't buy everything you hear, even from your marketing department, even from your communications person. Just say, mirror what you're hearing from the communications person who spoke to you. If the communication person says, so you want to be XYZ, you might want to say, no, I want to be ABC and have that conversation going. Yes, it takes a lot of time, but it's time saved later and it's a lot more money in your pockets eventually. Communication strategy is first. Communication, actual communication is next. Marketing is third. And that's the real way to go about it. Most people know, I think hopefully most people know that we have an AAM masterclass, and that's designed to help companies really understand how to prepare for advanced air mobility, but also because we do a lot of communication strategy in that. And that's how I educate the industry about how important it is to get into what you're doing for the right reasons, is also to be known as such. It reflects your core values and everything. So most of the time I spend on strategic advisory, strategic communication advisory is really on refining the business models and strategic choices that align with who you are, right? If you're a chef, well, then you're a chef. You're not a pastry chef, and vice versa, right? Those are very fundamental things. Oftentimes, I see a lot of culinary chefs who say, "Hey, I'm going to be a pastry chef," not in that industry, but in our industry, and it's like, no, you're not. You're an OEM. You are not an operator. And if you are, then let's talk about what does it look like? How does it sound? What does it feel like? Then we can get there. Shifting from one to the other because you've made that decision and now you're telling your marketing department doesn't fly very well. Designing culture, identifying key hires, these are part of the things that we do, creating strategic communications that defines the company not only internally but also builds credibility externally. Those are the really important parts that what we do and what communication does. So communication is really truly your competitive edge. there's a reason why communications people are part of almost every meeting that you do. It's again not because they want to be in the middle of everything, although some probably really do that. Personally, I have a headache after a while, and I can read so much technology buzzwords that after a while I get really overloaded. But it's to understand who you are, to understand everything that happens, so that I have a coherent strategy to give to marketing and everything. I'll tell you one thing that I've heard a good friend of mine say that is becoming something we kind of joke about, and it's called the buzzword soup. And a lot of press releases have a lot of that. And another way of talking about these people is we call them great chat GPT experts. Again, be careful how you use AI. I use AI, but I use it in a very different way. I use it as a tool. I do my research on AI, and then I ask it to confirm where it got that. Then I use other AI platforms to confirm this. And then eventually, well, not eventually, but I do use it as in editing for word flow only. Keep all the data in it. Do not remove anything, only word flow. So you see, AI does play a really good role, but it's not going to give you your strategy. You can do some vibe coding with AI, but you can't deliver the full product yet. Maybe if you pay for it, I don't know. I haven't looked into that just yet. If you're a mobility founder and you're not really clear on your purpose, your culture, your strategy narrative, please don't hire a marketing agency. That's just wasted money and it'll burn you out there. I've seen that over and over and over again for the last 35 years of my life. It's not worth it. This is where I come in. This is where this podcast platform comes in. You can find me at ElectricAirMobility.news, not .com, .news, although .com will go to .news. It doesn't matter. Or we can connect on LinkedIn if you want to have a conversation about what that look. If you're building something, interesting, concrete, innovative mobility solutions specifically, and you need strategic clarity before doing anything, please reach out. We love to hear you and to talk about that. And very soon we will have, as of next week, we will launch our Patreon platform where you can have access to all of this 48 hours before it becomes live. And we're very excited about this because, just like everybody else, we need help financially to pay for all of this stuff. And this is where you guys are going to come in really handy. Please like, subscribe, and of course, share this. We talked a lot about something that we, don't usually talk about in advanced air mobility, but wait, there's so much more. Insurance, firefighting, to name the few, EMS. We're finally starting to talk about EMS and advanced air mobility. There are a lot of other topics that we don't always have time to cover, and I wish we could. So this is my call out to you. Have you learned anything about communications? Gosh, I hope so. Thank you. Is there anything that rings true in what I said? Do you have a problem you relate to? Let's talk. But mostly, what do you understand now of communication? And how does that change your mind about what's going on? We'd love to have some comments and to let us know what all of this means to you. So again, we'll see you next week. We'll have another interview where we'll talk about people. I wanted to talk about communications, and there are a lot of other topics we can talk about. Look for our Patreon page where you can help support us. This is very important. We want to continue giving you very high-end information and educational pieces out there, but we also, need to, well, eat. Okay. So $3 a month is not a big deal. And there will be other tiers later as we move forward. My name is Nicholas Art. You have been watching a special edition of The Ways We Move, where we talked about communications and the importance of communication well done before marketing and PR. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.